Welcome everyone to the next episode of the Here Queer podcast. Today's guest is Devan, who is an eclectic person, draws his knowledge and lived experiences from the wisdom of Vedanta to current science. His queer identity is a blend of spirituality, human rights, and health promotion. Devan's work draws from over 30 years of HIV activism, advocacy, and expertise, includes developing and leading education, continuing medical education training, workshops, and developing resources and research to improve people living with HIV, queer, and trans health. He is involved in 7 research studies as co-investigator, collaborator, and co-chair. A very warm welcome, Devan, for joining us today.
Hi, Devan. Thank you for joining us today. How are you feeling today? That's the most important question.
I'm pretty good, Shivan. It's pretty cold here still. I'm in Toronto, and winter is still peaking. We had a bit of a blast of sunshine last week. We're back to freezing. I think it's like a -8 today. But otherwise, I'm pretty good.
And the weather here in Calcutta is really hot and humid, as you know. And I'm just switching on my AC at this point.
I'll take that hot, humid weather for a month, any day over winter.
For a month, and that to winter. So you are getting to choose. But here it's long summers.
So it can be.
Yeah, but good. We can just show off our swimsuits and go on for swim all the way. Okay, so let's quickly begin with the questions. I have very simple and 5 questions for you. I'll start with the very first one. As you know that you went to Canada to study, right, at a very young age, and probably you were 18 or 19. You can clarify that. How did that journey make you feel, like as compared to living outside Canada as an Indian? Did it make you feel more alive or more unrestricted when you moved out to study? And then what happened that made you choose that particular country to stay?
I think, when I left home, it was to study because I was born in Malaysia, and I wasn't getting accepted in any local universities because Malaysia has a racial quota in terms of how many different races get into university. So I didn't get. So a bunch of my friends were going abroad to study, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and I actually had no idea about, we studied geography, but I had no idea of actually what I was really making a decision on. And there wasn't anybody really that would give you advice. So right now, if you're going abroad to study, you could go to different places online. You can get guidance and saying, if you go study here, you'll do this, you'll do this. And so, I basically, and my father was financially okay to help me support me to go abroad to study. So I came here. And of course, I had never been anywhere outside my small hometown in Malaysia. And the first thing I knew, I got on a flight. My parents took me to the airport. I came here. I met my roommates on the plane. And the school, 3 of us lived in a basement apartment. And I also never knew I was racially different because in Malaysia, we're many different races. Everybody is shades of brown and lighter brown and darker brown. And when I came here, I realized racism exists, really in your face. And so that was like a real welcoming coming into Canada. And in those days, so I came when I was 19, and again, being very naive, I've never learned to cook. I never did anything, period. Typically living at home, mom and dad took care of most things. I come from a big family as the youngest, number 9 in the family of 10. So pretty much looked after. So it was a very steep learning curve to actually learn how to cook, what to buy in winter, what not to buy, everything, learning how to buy food, literally. Things like your parents or your mom or sisters did. You had to learn all that stuff. And, I remember the 3 of us, roommates, 3 of us were in grade 13, what we call at that point. We wanted to bake a cake, actually. So we went and bought the cake mixture. Then we made the mixture. Then we realized we didn't have actually a baking, plate, utensil. And so we said, how are we going to bake this? So we actually baked it in a frying pan. We actually put the frying pan. I mean, this is how naive we were. And we also didn't have like mitten gloves, right, to basically take the frying pan out of the oven. So it was a bit of a disaster because thankfully nothing got burned. The smoke alarm didn't go on. Like those were the growing pains. I mean, I remember the first week when I walked in Toronto. I came in January, which is winter season. So I didn't even clue in like, okay, January is winter, don't go. Go in September. Go for fall intake versus January. I fell down that week 7 times trying to walk on snow. Because if you have no experience walking in the snow, you're going to learn that by falling, right? Yeah. So there you go. That was the initiation into Canada.
So,
Right.
I kind of really was thinking about my college life when I also kind of learned how to cook, how to buy utensils for what is required.
Totally.
And that has been a struggle. But also it was quite liberating in a way that you get to choose what you want to eat, how you want to dress up, which kind of parties you want to attend, what kind of friends do you want to have. So it was in a way liberating for me when I was in Delhi. Uh, but I'm more curious to know from you is you can consider this as a quick follow-up. That's what kind of exposure do you have with the South Asian cultures, particularly?
So, so when I came here to Toronto then, I mean, I knew it was different as a kid. I didn't have a word like, how was I different? Because what in school, when we were in high school, as typically boys' school, we had all this, adult magazines being passed around in school, I remember. And I didn't relate to a lot of the pictures in the images. So I thought, okay, why am I not feeling what my friends are feeling? And when I came here, I still see the words like what we use now, gay, lesbian, trans, queer, all those words didn't really exist in 1970s, especially in Asian countries. Also, many of those words are criminalized, right? So you don't really say you want to identify with a community is criminalized and pathologized, right? So coming here, it took me, and going to school, also financially, once you come here, everything's a lot more expensive and you do the cost exchange of, and then you learn, and then you learn to deconstruct everything that you were taught to believe. What is it to be a male? What is it to be, have emotions, and how do you identify, and finding your orientation in terms of sexual orientation or gender identity. And can you be fluid, not fluid? See, those words don't exist in those days. You had to pick one box or the other. So I would say typically my gay, queer identity did not really solidify until my late 30s, after having gone through a lot of trials and errors of relationship, of what worked. It's kind of really terrible because those things take so many years to figure out. And you cannot go back and...
But are you guilty that it took so many hours, or have you made peace with your journey?
Hours? It took years. What I feel is, because you cannot get those years back. I mean, you don't regret it, but because you cannot go back and live those years and say, oh, now I wish I did this in my 20s, so I would have done this in my 30s. You can't. So you try to be more aware, but the good thing is you then learn to be more aware of the decision-making process, so you don't repeat the same learning experiences over and over and over and over. Is right. Being in a dysfunctional relationship, like, why do you need to repeat this 5 times before you get it? Right. So I think that was the learning curve. And I had to do a lot of soul searching in the process. So, for example, in the year 2000, age of 40, I went to India and I spent a year in India. Just a year. I took a year off work and I just basically spent a year in India, backpacking, tracking, in terms of actually, and I met a lot of interesting people. I also intentionally traveled third-class train to meet people who actually were part of the community. And they were really intrigued at why I from the West would do a third-class train. But I got to have amazing experiences. which I would never give away for anything. Right? And I also met a lot of spiritual people like yogis and gurus in the mountains. So those things were like amazing. So I think and I am more comfortable now actually identifying with the queer framework versus the gay word. Because it's funny, I was watching the movie Aligra yesterday, and in that Professor Siras mentions the gay word, 3 miserable words. How can 3 words define you as as a person who is not heterosexual? And English, the colonizer's language, the very limited language and vocabulary to actually give people the choice to express desire and love and any other expression. It's like, you're gay. So what? It doesn't tell people anything about you except you like the same sex. And I'll talk a bit later, but actually why in our cultures, which is much older than Western culture, we have so much of historical context and richness that would help us define who we are. We just have to dig into it.
And that comes to my second question, because you already started talking about cultures and you brought in a comparison between the West and the East. So the next question is, Hindu traditions have historically shown fluid ideas of gender and sexuality through stories of gods and goddesses, right? Yet, modern political frameworks, like if you are aware of what's happening in India at this point with the Transgender Persons Act of 2019, and there is certain things that has been changed this year again, have sparked a lot of debate. So how do you personally reconcile these spiritual traditions with the realities queer and trans people face today? And it's just not in India, but probably across the world.
Across the world. So I think there's a lot of politicization of especially trans identities, what's happening in the US, other European countries, Asian countries, right? Where India's recently this week, I think in India, the Transgender Persons Act 2019. So I think, I can't speak for the West because the politics of the region is different context, but I think from an Indian context, I think it's really important to understand. I'm going to recommend everybody read this book, Titra Prakriti, right? And for people who are not familiar with, in terms of actually historical context, religion, gods, goddesses, this will clarify for anybody the heteronormative norm. Gods don't have a gender, goddesses and gods, right? I personally also met a lot of gurus and yogis in India who actually clearly defined to me, and I've asked them, I said, so tell me from the Puranas and all the spiritual texts, like what exactly all the spiritual texts out there, right? The Upanishads and everything. What does it mean to be LGBTQ? And this yogi basically said, all that matters is, he said, your soul doesn't have a gender. Your soul is not straight or gay or lesbian or trans. Your soul is pure energy, is Prakriti. What matters is to love the person. He said, you've taken on a Prakriti, a constitution, to identify with who you are. You've given it a name and a label, but also it's a label that will give you a lot of challenges because a lot of people have problems and will not agree with who you are. But also on a soul level, you've taken on very high and intense learning. So a lot of, because for many of us who identify as part of the LGBTQI communities, we have a lot of challenges how we make people accept us and why it's important to us. So what I have done, instead of trying to get everyone to accept me and like me and love me, which is a very difficult arduous task, right? Whether it's family or community or political landscape, you need to build a relationship with your spirituality. And that's what's going to save your ass. That's what's going to give you growth.
I think that's what I love about how you bring in this concept, particularly with spirituality and Hinduism. It's also because, we sometimes forget to look inside, and we always kind of look at the outer attributes that's causing disturbances. But I think when we are with peace or at peace with ourselves, then only we can be those leaders to kind of shift the mindset across continents, across cultures. So it doesn't start from outside, it starts from within. And spirituality gives us that momentum, that space.
And in yoga, spirituality, meditation, tantra, our culture is rich, is beyond richness with what we have. So instead of looking at everything out west and saying, the one thing the West has is got decriminalization of homosexuality, right? Interestingly, who brought that up? The West brought it. The West started it in 1864, right? Hundreds of countries, and India actually was the first country in 1861 actually that got criminal code, right? And then all the other colonies, and then all the other colonizers, the British, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, all laid it out across the world. So we are basically taking the brunt of this colonial nightmare, and 69 countries still have the laws in place for whatever reason, for political votes mostly, and then using it, against people, right? Which is an absolute shame. So all these laws that come in place about this transgender person, it is not spiritual anyway. It is not religious, because the gods don't have a problem with this. People are just using this to define people, right? And if you look at India in general, right? I mean, you've got the largest population in the world, I forget how many billion in there, right? Well, you don't get 1 billion over people in there if everybody's meditating. People having sex, for heaven's sake, right? So we need to understand sexuality is a part of human identity, right? And not to criminalize it. I mean, for trans people who are basically in many cultures are revered and is seen as a combination of male and female identities, highly, seen upon as highly evolved beings. Why are governments, what I don't understand is why are governments so afraid of such a small amount of percentage of people in the world?
Exactly. And I think, it takes me back to history, particularly from Indian history perspective. The medieval era, the highest or the superior beings were the transgender ones. They had access to both the harems where the queen used to live, and
Totally.
also had the access to the common population, and even the entire kingdoms, whatever governance apparatus was there, they were the people who were silently calling the shots and providing the intelligence. And it is not me and you talking about it. It's all documented.
It's all documented. And so why are we, constantly policing them, criminalizing them, othering them? Because if you're worried about country politics, this is like 1% of the population. This is not where your focus should be. In the LGBTQ, typically, we're looking at, we're 10% of the population. And within the 10%, like 4.5 is like gay men. And then basically we have, lesbians. And then we have, trans and intersex people, right? Other identities. So trans people form typically around 1% of the population, or maybe a bit more, right? So they're not the problem in any country, right? Why are politicians, they just want to be left alone, right? So why are politicians focusing on this? This is like the question should be, every country's got more problems than focusing on the most minority of the minority population, and then sort of stigmatizing it, right? Versus improving the quality of life, Yeah, so it's kind of really bizarre. What is the political agenda across, for example, the US and other countries, Russia, right? Other countries across the world doing this. I think it's absolutely sad that actually humans should be evolving versus, digressing. Because I think we did the criminalization in Canada. So in Canada, decriminalized homosexuality around 55 years ago, right? 1969, when Pierre Trudeau said the state has no business in between explanations, a long speech, right? But also before that, people were criminalized by giving electroshock therapy, lost jobs, and a whole bunch of things, right? What's happening at that point, so the US, Canada. So there's a public apology in 2018 by then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So countries should learn about this. You see, LGBTQ people across the world pay taxes.
Yeah.
So why don't we have the full rights? You want us to pay tax, but we can have the rights to, whether to get married, to adopt children, all those things, discrimination against the law. And so I was speaking to somebody actually in India yesterday. I said something that actually they should focus on. Right now there's a lot of discussions on the blood ban and stuff like that. We had the same thing in Canada, and we changed the language to actually about sexual behavior, in terms of your sexual behavior, what you're doing in terms of sex versus your sexual orientation. So that's what the question is. So it just stops discriminating against gay people when they donate blood. Right? So everybody who have certain sexual behaviors are basically then the blood is screened, and then the questionnaire is screened, and that's how things move onward. Right? So I think countries can learn from the latest science in terms of how to do this well versus just stigmatizing, targeting specific groups of people for who they are. Right? Because India and generally also has, I think, our fourth largest case of HIV in the world. Right? It's higher rate of syphilis. So I think you need to look at population health versus targeting specific groups of people. Making things like PrEP accessible for all people who are sexually active, right? Like those things many other governments have done. I think in Australia and UK they did that, and they found a big reduction in HIV. Right? So I think we can learn from those things versus using it against. So I'm sorry, I forget you mentioned something else.
No, that's absolutely fine. I mean, whatever you are talking about makes sense, particularly in the 21st century, and we can always learn from global best practices and then contextualize them as per our own needs and benefits of individual community. So that's something that is very interesting. Do you have anything to
What
say?
do you measure? LGBTQ rights are something you constantly have to fight for and to actually advocate for. Like you look in the US, had all the great rights, everything's getting withdrawn, right? So I tell people actually in the queer community, never take your rights for granted. Governments change all the time. Every few years, new government, new politics come into place, right? So people need to really be aware that actually you need to stop being so complacent that, oh, well, we have the rights, everything's good to go. I work in gay men's health right now, right, for the past, 15 years, right? And so you need to understand that actually, although we have, and something I'll talk about the fallacy of the Western, like everything is great in the West. We have rights, I get it. It doesn't mean that actually everybody's happy within the LGBT community, right? So that notion that, oh, you can get married there, so it's all lovely. But marriage also is a very heterosexual, privilege concept, right? And if you look at why even marriages came about, from what I read a while ago, is because, the Church of England, I forget what year, many, some 18th, 19th century, there were a lot of illegitimate children. So the church said, in order for you to actually create, property rights, you need to actually be married. You can't have all these people showing up and saying, I'm so-and-so's kid. That's how marriages eventually came about. In India, in Africa, South America too, there were a lot of maternal systems. Women choose the husbands because men would go to war, men would die, right? So women had the rights. All of that was eroded through colonization. Right? So I think we really need to question why, because a lot of gay men I meet, on social media from India, I want to get married. I'm like, why do you want to get married? Like, what is it about marriage? Is it an Indian thing, or is it just because you think marriage will make your life better?
Or it will give the license to have legitimate sex.
I don't know, but I think also, I personally don't know a lot of people who are married are very happy, personally speaking, right? So, whether gay or straight, and as a gay man who is 65 years old, I don't actually miss ever, being married. Like, I'm not married, right? I don't see that as a need, because I think if you spiritually develop your spirituality and you're content in your body and you're whole as best as you can be, you don't need to be tied to somebody to be married, to love them. It's a legal agreement. And there are legal implications when you divorce, right? Straight or gay. So people need to understand this. So I think what people need to understand is you want the right to have same-sex spousal, legal arrangement that actually you have a next of kin, you have the will, you can put it in your partner's name. So there are things people need to think about deeper. So many of us in the West question, the whole marriage thing, right? Because if you look historically what happened here when AIDS crisis was happening in the 80s and 90s, basically that overwhelmed everybody's, sense of identity, especially the community, people are dying left, right, and center. And then, we had marriage rights. So one thing sort of superseded the other. right? And so right now, we still haven't actually really tackled in terms of HIV stigma, for example, which is rampant across the world, right? So you have rights, but you still have a lot of stigma for your identity, your HIV status, your sexual behavior. So I think it's like a masala mix of things, right? And it's like, how do you choose your priorities? It's really complicated. And also for gay men, like, I work in a lot of health research here. So for gay men, we have so many competing health interests. High rate of mental health issues, high rate of addiction, high rate of HIV, high rate of STI, high rate of, other issues in the community, right? And intimate partner violence. So I actually feel like, okay, where's the happy ending?
Yeah, it's a complicated web of mess.
It is. And I'm like, this is really depressing. Right? So I want to write a report on something happy about us, right? And I can't think of what happy thing to say, because we have all the tools here we have to have an amazing, wholesome life. So why isn't that happening? So like last week, like this month of February and March, we had 3 types of infection happening in the Toronto area. We have basically, last week we have Mpox clade 1B, a new strain, right? Before that we had fungal infection. It's a complicated biological word. It's called TMW2. And then basically before that we had Shigella infection. All within a month span, affecting gay. So, like in India, I don't know. Other parts of the world, I don't know. We have, a party, PNP party at play or chemsex issue across the world, right? Now affecting women everywhere. Because I think now there is something called antimicrobial resistance globally, right? So gonorrhea is not easily treatable anymore through the drugs that we use to treat it. So there's only like a couple of drugs now that work for it, right? And so this is something globally affecting people that actually, because there's been so many antibiotics, there's so many things, people either use it too often, misused it, not adherent to it, and we have developed a chronic antimicrobial resistance globally. And this is a problem because as more infections come up, it's harder to treat it. That's something I think for gay men, you need to be aware of this, right? This is why even doxycycline is used to prevent syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia. What we recommend is basically just to use it right only after sex, not to take it daily, just to prevent again antimicrobial resistance. So it is a complicated world that we live in, and I feel really sorry for a lot of young gay men who are struggling with so many decisions to make, because it's a lot of stuff to understand, to navigate the world in terms of how do you meet somebody that you can actually have a meaningful conversation with.
I know. Yeah. I'm also in the same boat. What it feels like. There are too many questions that you have to take decisions for in a 24 hours and in the day-night process of it. And it keeps repeating. The number of questions keeps growing each day. So, anyways,
it is complicated, yeah.
It is complicated, and that makes me move on to my next complicated question for you, because you have already kind of pulled those facts out there. So the next question is, many people imagine the LGBTQ community as automatically supported, but many queer people experience loneliness, competition, and even toxicity within the same community spaces, quote unquote, which many organizations and people call as safe space. Why do you think this happens, and how can we build healthier emotional support systems within our?
So I think at first we want to tackle this safe space. There's no such thing as a safe space. There's a safer space always, right? Because you make something a bit more tolerable, manageable, versus where if you're going out to a public space and wanting to be yourself. So in these safer spaces, you can just be you. You can say what you want to say to get it off your chest, what you're feeling, so people are not judging you, right? But this whole issue of toxicity in the community, it has been long here before, from the 70s, 80s, 90s. It's been there. I mean, I think many of us older gay men and even, queer women, and older, other trans people that I know, I think some of the reasons we talk about is because everyone's got a personal trauma of coming up at some point. And the years of accepting who you are, we kind of take it on each other, to put it simply. Right? Because we think we're among our kind, so we'll just say what we want. We'll treat them with disdain and disrespect, not realizing how we are making other people feel. Right? And this is a common thing now. Before apps, because the apps, internet dating only started in mid-1990s. With the internet arriving, right? Before that, basically, to meet somebody, you went to a bar and you met somebody. And if I met you, I'll say, hey, I'll meet you. I'll say, I like you. I get to know your name and we go home. We never, ever said top, bottom, in between, versatile, side, whatever. I call them all nonsense terms in my experience. Because I think this is my political view on this terminology. It's completely disrespectful to people as a human being. Because when you identify as top, bottom, side, you're basically sexual positioning. This is how I want to have sex with you. Before you even get to know the person's name.
I think we are also objectifying each other in a way.
Hugely objectifying. And when you objectify somebody like that, do you actually think the future of anything happening out of this? Because all you're talking, if you break that objectification, all you're talking about is basically your genitals and your butthole, to put it crudely. That's what you're talking about, really.
Yeah.
When you talk about tops and bottoms, where what goes into what. This is not how you meet somebody. If you want to develop a meaningful friendship or relationship, right? And I think people need to get that.
There is a saying in the LGBT world that, there was a very viral reel on Instagram. And I was so sad looking at that. Somebody portrayed that the first meeting is always something. And then the relationship starts, or then the friendship starts. It's so wrong way to put it, that you first have sex, and if it goes well, then you start developing that relationship. It's nonsense.
It is strangely very normal and toxic in the gay culture. Since the time I've actually, since I've known, I would say the 40 something years, like a lot of gay men, their friends are somebody they've had sex with. It's kind of a weird thing. I don't know why. Like, I need to have sex with you to become your friend, and we normalize it as like, this is how friendships develop. It is really weird. I'm just going to say I think it's very weird. And thankfully, I choose not to. If I am dating somebody and we break up, I don't say now we need to be friends. No, we broke up for a reason, because we're not good together.
I'm not your friend after the breakup. I'm sorry. Because we did not work out for a reason. And there's nothing hard against you. But just because we could not work as a couple, as a partner, you automatically are in my friends list. That doesn't happen. You have
that doesn't. It's not healthy, actually.
It's not healthy. I don't know what it is, but you cannot get the free ticket to my friends list just because you could not be a better partner.
Yeah.
You have to
walk
in line with me to get that respect, to get that space.
Totally. And I think it's something that, but I think also because, there's an analogy in the book, that I read a while back about, I can't remember the name of the book actually, but it's like, because for many gay men, and I think even now, maybe in the West a bit different, in your teens, you can bring your boyfriend to your prom or whatever, right? In many countries across the world, you cannot do that. So you don't really have a chance to develop your identity in your teens, in adolescence, in your teens, in your formative years. You have to hide it, you have to pretend, you have to suppress it, till you become 20 and you leave home or go to college. And then so in your 20s, you're actually living your teenage years of trying to figure out what kind of a guy do I like? Who do I want to date? So because don't have any role models to teach you how to do this, for many of us, there are no role models, right? We kind of learn by mistake. And so we say, I want to be friends, but I also want to have sex with you, but I also want to date you. So you want to do every one thing as one person. So your idea actually of keeping friends, lovers, partners, all that all becomes muddled up into one person, right? And it's kind of sad and it's funny and I know it's not funny because people are getting affected by this, right? So this is what happens. So in your 20s, you're living your teenage years. In your 30s, you're living your 20s. In your 40s, you're living your 20s and 30s. Trying to figure out, I want a partner. Where do I go? How do I find this? And of course, when you go on apps, you're basically putting yourself into a box. Your age, your race, your identity, what you do in bed, what you don't do, everything. People are not boxes. People are humans. We're multidimensional. Right?
And we change over time.
We change over time, we evolve. So this is why apps don't work to develop anything seriously. And so Grindr, for example, typically is if you want to hook up, it's a quick 5-minute, half an hour interaction. You go in, you get validation. So hookups for me basically are you go in, you get validation, you're hot, you're desirable, you have sex, then it goes. Then you go back again because it becomes an addictive behavior where you actually keep going back for more and more and more. It's like you have one ice cream scoop, you want another scoop because it felt so good. So you go back again. And if you have a whole tub of ice cream, you get sick. Right? You end up throwing up, right? Most often. So people need to understand I'm not addicted to the app because I get a guy who keeps telling me I'm hot. But what underlying all of this is they want one guy who will always find them attractive and desirable. So you go back hoping to meet that one guy. And that 1 week becomes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 54 weeks, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Yes, there's somebody on Instagram actually was an app on all the dating things and the challenges of the dating things. And he's kind of sad that actually people have to go. And I'm so glad for all of us who are older, we never had any horrible apps. I met you, I talked to you, I went home with you, we figured out what to do. And it's just, and I think if people want to meet each other, because I know a lot of young gay men who are chronically lonely. And I'm like, why are you, including you? I had a guy, this week for Instagram send me an app, like an absolutely gorgeous guy in Kolkata who sent me an app, right? Who sent me a message. I'm like, you're an absolutely gorgeous man. I'm sorry, like I'm half across the world, but I'm also much older than you. Like you should be able to meet somebody in India. And he said, everybody, who's older is married. I'm like, well, I'm sure there are a lot of young, 40s, 50s guys. You're not. So it just this sad irony, I met somebody also on Instagram. So I get a lot of these young guys who are all looking for somebody who's like gay, available, centered, stable, wants a dating, wants a relationship. People are not meeting each other because the problem with the apps also, you lose the art of conversation.
Yes.
You don't know how to talk when you meet somebody because you cannot talk to them in emojis.
And no, I think one of the biggest problems of these dating apps, you can just correct me if you have another opinion, but I feel it sets your identity, as you correctly say, in a box. And what happens when the person evolves, say, after 5 years or 10 years, and when that person again comes back to the dating app and the criteria do not fit for the other person who has, looked at his profile or her profile from 5 years before, the whole community has already picturized that person to be a static image. And, that becomes an outcast. So they cannot accept the fact that this person, say, for example, started out his LGBT journey as a cop, and now he is a verse, probably. So people have very much, agitation, anxiousness, anxiety to kind of accept that this person has evolved. This person has got more experiences. So that also blocks people from communicating with each other and not meet up with them and ask these questions face to face. That, hey, you were like that. What changed you? What kind of experiences did you have? We never talk about these.
I think people are afraid that actually, I mean, every gay person I know or intimately involved with always have evolved sexually from being, whatever, however they chose. I call it sexual positioning versus tops and bottoms, because that's what really you're doing. That's what really you're doing. How you want to position yourself on a bed. Long story short. So when you put it that way, then
How do you put it? I will use this next time.
sexual positioning. This is what I want in bed. I want you to fuck me. I don't know if you can say that on the podcast or not. I want to do it. I want to be done. Right?
Yeah. And it can change over time. It's all about a mutual.
It has to change because it means you are growing as a person. Right?
Yeah.
But because also the human body is erogenous in all the zones. And if you're really uncomfortable with certain body parts, that's something you need to work on in your body. Not to say, I don't do that. Well, what is the reason? Well, I'm not comfortable. Why are you not comfortable? Let's get into that. And do some self-therapy.
Ask within what's causing me that barrier to not like something. And also, if I'm sleeping with someone or if I'm developing a beautiful relationship with another person, I think that's a healthy relationship where we can talk about this, where we can argue about what do we want and at what point of time and what kind of makes us not like something. That's also should be a subject on the table to discuss. If we are unable to discuss, that means we are failing at those bonding and those relationships.
So hugely, I think, I feel like some really good relationships. I have to say my best dating or whatever was like a long time ago. In generally, I'm pretty much become like a yogi. So I'm not missing. I don't feel I'm missing because I think what I want and what I'm finding kind of don't really connect, right? So it's like, okay, you know what? I tell myself like, you've had great sex, just be cool with that. So that's how I'm going. This thing also, it is because so many people have so many limitations of how to identify what they want and don't want. And it's very hard to have a conversation with people when they have all these limitations. So my question is, I know a lot of people in open relationships, and because I work in STIs, HIV prevention, control, all that kind of stuff, and we know there's a high, infection rate in gay men's communities of various infections. So my question was like, in spite of all of these health challenges, why do we still keep talking about open relationships? Like, if you're committed to somebody, why do you still need another dick or dicks? And how many more buttholes? To make this really crude, because that's what it comes down to, right? Like, how many men do you need in your life to feel validated? Why do we need so much diversity of bodies and experiences to feel good about ourselves? Like, what is that actually feeding into us? What is empty in us that we need so much of validation? And this is the part I just understand, in gay culture, right? In terms of, how people see this. And also when I look at all these apps and a lot of gay content online, everybody is showing their six-pack, their pecs, their muscles. Well, after a while, it's really boring to look at just muscles because you need to have some substance. You need to be able to have a conversation, so can you have a conversation along with the muscle? I go to the gym, I'm 65 years old, I've lived with HIV for 37 years, I'm in pretty decent health, right? So you need a bit more substance to your identity, to your well-being, to your mental, emotional, spiritual, sexual, physical well-being versus just number of pecs or how big your dick is. And the other thing with dick size, I always think this is kind of funny. A lot of gay men say, the messages like with your dicks. I'm like, well, and we all know this also again through research that actually, when you always focus on your dick, eventually there's something you're basically lacking in. So what is it you're trying to compensate for? And we know in a lot of research studies, actually men who are hyper masculine, in terms of muscle building also have a lot of childhood abusers. So you're trying to make up for what actually they couldn't actually compensate for. So I think you need to look at the larger question of why we're obsessed with, muscles and body size and dick size. Like, what is this really telling us about who we are as a people? And then you tie them with all the chronic health issues that we have. None of it adds up. So I don't know. This is something just to think about. It's kind of sad for me because I work in research, I work in healthcare, and I see this. And for most of us who work in this, we see this and we don't understand why this is just going on. This has been like, for 40
No,
years,
and
we have,
as you
yeah,
said, as you correctly pointed out, I would also like to bring in one perspective which I'm currently quite pissed off. And even the people who are working in the backdrop to build this here queer initiative, they are also very bothered. So very recently, we partnered up. I'm not mentioning that organization, but then we partnered up with them. They collaborated on our reels on our Instagram, and
yeah,
initially we felt that, wow, this is, doing great, this is validation. But slowly we are moving, backwards from that kind of a collaboration. And we know that we are being massively hit by the number of views, because their collaboration brought us a lot of views. But we do not want to build our brands on the basis of views, which doesn't matter. We want the views to come from credible people who really believe what we also believe and trying to tell to the world, right? And what happened with this particular organization or page, however you would like to classify them, that when we gave them a content which was much more deeper, we were talking about, if you have seen our previous episodes, Kiran was talking about how, imagination is something very personal
yeah,
in queer human beings' life, because most often than not, we can only imagine our lives to be in such a happy way, or we can only imagine that we can have a partner who is loyal to me. We can imagine the sense of belonging, because we do not have it in reality, and we do
yeah,
not have such role models who have been successful in doing those things or experiencing them. So they refused us, saying, your message is very complicated, and please allow us to decide, at least to choose what goes up on our page when we collab. And that was very well defined message, and we do not have any problem with that. The only thing that me and my co-founder, we were so, sad that why is, naked people are getting those collab requests on the very same page, and why such an important topic is being sidelined and by our same community. So that kind of co-founder was laughing and saying me, oh, just you remove your pants and you will be up there on the, on that page. And we
yeah,
then kind of concluded to a place that we are trying to build something very different here, and we shouldn't be bothered about the number of views, but more importantly the kind of narrative that we are trying to build, because it works like an archive where people, maybe 5 years down the line, if problems still exist, they can come back to the starting point, which is us, from where we
yeah,
started. They can rely back on these conversations, and that becomes a repository, because it's not just me, it's many people who are coming to the podcast and sharing their problems, their lives, and their journeys.
yeah. Now, I think sometimes we compete for quantity over quality. I think there's a lot of that out there, right? You take off your shirt, you take off your pants, and like you've got six abs. Okay, that's great. That's hot. And then I'm like, okay, and I tell this to a lot of guys. I've seen a lot of naked bodies. So what? Like, how is this impressing me? Honestly, seriously, because I get this random folks on Instagram who send me. I'm like, who are you? I don't even know your name, right? And you're just sending me a naked picture of you. And what am I supposed to do with this? It doesn't work for me. Seriously, it doesn't. And I don't know why people think it works for But there's a lot of actually gay content magazines from the US where it's all just semi-naked men. It's hot, hot, hot. I'm like, this is so mentally
And have you
tiresome
seen
to look at.
how the LGBT community has transformed or translated beauty with nakedness, or
Yeah,
photography and models to be only naked and swimwear and see-through underwears and whatnot? I mean, there is a kink. I understand that, but what you are trying to portray is something else.
I think the human body is a beautiful anatomy, right? It's a gorgeous when you have a gorgeous man in front of you, and when you have a man who's beautiful in itself, lying in front of you, right? But I think we tend to objectify bodies in general and anatomy and genitals, and so this is better than that, right? And I think there's a real problem with how we do that. And I think, but it's partly also like a very immature way of thinking and looking at people in terms of not understanding the full scope of actually how everybody is beautiful in their own way. And sometimes I think the less you see, the more exciting it is to meet them versus seeing everything. For me, like that's the way I
Yes.
think. Like, I rather not see a man's full body naked, but I'm more excited to meet him because at the end of the day, for me, I'm interested in your mind. This may sound like a cliche, but I want to know, can I have a conversation with you on any topic? Can we agree to disagree on things? Can we agree on things? What is your outlook on certain? That's what basically captures me with a human being. But most people are more comfortable to conform to the masses.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps them safe and they say, I follow everybody. Because I know also, interestingly, in spirituality, over 90% of people are followers. They follow whoever, whatever does, right? And then it's only like less than 5% people actually have original thinking process. And the same thing works in fashion, right? Every fashion repeats itself every 20 years. So when I used to wear bell bottoms, now bell bottoms are back in trend. I got tattoos in early 19. I had nose piercings, in early 1996, 97. Wore it as long as I wanted, got rid of it. Now everybody's got nose piercing, right? So this tattoos, right?
Not
Tattoos are back
me.
in, yeah, not you. So I did it then, right? And so it's like fashion comes and goes. But you see, what is really sad is everybody's trying to be an individual, right? So I'm going to do all these things to my body to be an individual stand up. But when you have a million people doing that, it loses its individuality,
True.
right? And so this is why then everybody looks like mass produced. It's ironical and sad at the same time. So this is why I think it takes a lot to be an original human being, right? Whatever that
Takes
is.
a lot, and I think we have not been trained because partly responsible for the colonization of education systems, because it
Hugely,
was
hugely.
training all individuals to stop thinking and to
Yeah.
start following
Conform, conform.
orders, right? Confirm. So, any which ways, it's a broader debate that can go on for hours.
Yeah,
And
hugely.
but let me just quickly ask you my last question.
Sure.
So, I believe you are in your 60s, early 60s,
I am
and
65. Oh, just passed 65 last year, June. Keeping it well.
okay. So I'll reframe the question. At 65, having lived through different political climates, cultures, and stages of the queer movement, what dreams or intentions do you hold for the next phase of your life? And what advice would you give to your younger queer people who are still navigating identity, community, and belonging?
So my dreams or intentions. Well, a couple of dreams I have. So I definitely want to. I'm planning to come back to India because there's a few other. I love the temples I go to in India. That's like my biggest like joy. I mean, this sounds weird, but like in 1989 when I first came to India, I spent 6 months traveling through India, north, south, east, west. I bought a 6 month train pass, and I traveled everywhere. And that experience like completely, helped me in terms of who I am as identity. I understood everything about being Indian. And and practicing Hinduism and what my parents did XYZ. It was the most beautiful experience of my life. And I backpacked in those days, which is fine to backpack. Did the track pants, never shaved for days, weeks, and I traveled, and it was amazing. I met the most amazing people in my life that I got invited to people's homes, and I met poor people who invited me. I went there, I ate food with them. Grandmothers on trains fed me. I died, and I'm so happy that I had that experience. And I tell everybody in your life, please travel wherever you want. Just go, be yourself. My future intentions basically is it would be nice to meet like a really great guy, if and I'm not into like gotta marry somebody, not into the marriage thing, but like a really nice boyfriend or partner. I'm very self-sufficient and complete myself. So I'm not looking for anyone to complete me. I'm complete. Right? So somebody who's ideally got his act together would be lovely to meet, right? I like in generally brown men. That's my inclination, right? Yes, right. And those are my dreams, and I really want to spend more time in my spiritual practices because part of it is to go to a few more temples in India and really, I'm very a big devotee of Shiva and Shakti, and I love him. I was very blessed in my life to have experiences of gurus from Ramana Maharishi to Lahiri Mahasaya to Bhagwan Nityananda to Paramsa Ramakrishna, Mata Amritananda. I got them, some of them I got through meditation visitations, some I met in person, and I met other gurus. So I'm very blessed in many ways, and I'm very thankful for those blessings, right, to keep me sane. And because gay life has been very challenging in general, and living HIV, having experienced so many people dying, was also a wake up call to me that life is precious, right?
Yeah.
So for many of the younger people, who never experienced that, and thankfully you never experienced what we'd experienced in the 80s and 90s, the masses of gay men and trans women who died is unbelievable, right? You've lost a whole entire generation of people who would be elders, right? So for the younger people, I would say really important, you got to get to know who you are. You got to build your connection, being queer, with your spiritual connection, because that is what's going to hold you through life. Not your partner, not your boyfriend, not your girlfriend, not your mother, not your father. That's what's going to give you a solid footing in understanding all the shifts in your life, right? Whether people like you, don't like you. Because what at the end of the day, it matters that you like you. You love you. And your relationship with the higher power is solid, like a concrete block. There is no shifting. So people may say whatever they want against you, that divinity in you, and it's not outside you, it's in you, is always grounded, right? That's basically what you need to be to have a sense of community and belonging. The other third thing is that not everybody will like you. I lived here, not everybody's crazy about me, I'll be honest with you. Because I think very different, right? But I also know when to not to say everything because I do what I do for a living, but I just give my work and I leave. I don't have to have a conversation on everything I disagree with. So learning to have your boundaries is really important. Learning also to say no is important. Learning to take care of yourself is really crucial. And so ultimately all this comes down to you gotta love you for you. The good and the bad and the ugly and everything. And if you can do that, you'll meet somebody who can also love you for all those things. That's how I tell young people.
And that's an awesome answer. I mean, while you were speaking, I was also reflecting back that yes, that is exactly what probably each one of us who are in this figuring out process at this
Yeah.
point should do, because ultimately we have to live with ourselves, and we uh, cannot expect anything to come from outside unless we are sorted from inside.
Yeah, and
And
that's really important, right? You your family, your parents will be there. If they support you is good. If they don't, that's still because and what a lot of young people need to understand, you took years to understand who you are. So if you choose to come out to somebody, you need to give them time to accept you. You can't just drop a bomb and say, Mom, Dad, I'm gay, right? And they can say, great. Right? It takes them a bit of time to understand what that means, right? If that's a new concept to them. So be patient with people that you tell that, you're different, you're gay,
I
you're
think I
straight.
know this process. I'm going through it as we speak.
Yeah, there you go.
And
So, and it's
progress.
okay, right? If people don't jump and say right away, that's great. Because you need to give them time, but also be gentle with yourself. It's really crucial if people don't reciprocate right away.
True.
Yeah,
Very true.
be
So
gentle.
thank you for
My
giving your
pleasure.
time today. And with this, I will close this session or episode, as you want to call it, with extending an invitation to Calcutta, to India. Please come and we can talk again in person, and probably we can collaborate again in the future.
Love to do
Thank
that,
you.
Devan. Okay, thank you so much for
Thank you.
this. Many blessings to
Thank
you. Big hugs and love. Okay,
Bye bye.
bye.